how can you restore faith in politics?
I think the government has got to start communicating with itself. I think we're seeing that there is a real problem with the left hand knowing what the right hand is doing. Even down to just in this last week, we heard the Prime Minister say that he's going to go softly, softly on what he puts through Parliament, hoping that it's going to get through the Senate, whereas Joe Hockey said that he was going to stick with the existing budget that he had. So there's a disconnect there between two of the most senior people in the government. So I think miscommunication is a real problem within the existing government.
Greg.
Well, two things, Tony, real briefly. One, breaking promises hurts credibility. There's no doubt about that. Even if they're stupid promises, breaking them really hurts credibility. But let me make a characteristic foreign editor's point. Right across the Western world at the moment, there is a crisis of governance. Look at the shambles of Europe. Look at the gridlock in the American Congress. Some of the factors I outlined before means that the power of nope is much greater than the power of hope. The power of blocking minorities, the power of stopping things. And I think this is a civilisational challenge. And what we're experiencing in Australia is one version of what's happening right across the Western world.
Actually, Brian, I can bring you in at that point. I was going to bring you in later, but he's obviously raised the issue, the power of nope. I mean, Obama raised such high expectations in America. Oppositional politics and his own inadequacies as a manager, you could say, have caused terrible cynicism now to seep into American politics, as it has in other countries. What do you say? What are your reflections on this idea?
Well, I think the questioner actually has it exactly right. I think that there are two styles of leadership. One is to say, I'm the best leader because when I compare myself to the other potential candidates, I'm better than they are. And it's not really a forward-looking kind of leadership. It's a leadership rooted in the politics and posturing of who has power and who's trying to get it and who's going to keep it. And we've seen that in the States. You know, I think Barack Obama came to prominence because he said, I'm going to be a different kind of leader. I have this vision. I have this hope. But our system is very, very corruptive. It very much is about compromise. I actually think great leadership comes when people show courage. You know, I would like to see politicians do things that are not politically expedient, that require a vision, that sort of reflect a belief in things that they haven't necessarily seen and that are difficult. And it's hard to, in an electoral system, be courageous. But ultimately, that's what the best presidents, the best leaders do. And I think that, you know, what's interesting to me right now, just globally, and I think the comments have been made earlier are right. We're in a point now where everybody's so fragile and so determined to hold on to power that they forfeit leadership. And we need leadership. There are a lot of menacing challenges going on around the world. There are economic tensions, and the world is getting smaller. And so our governance actually has to get bigger. We can't afford to get mired down in the local politics of any given nation. We've got to begin to understand what it takes to provide the kind of resources and support for peoples around the world, many of whom have not had power before. And that's the challenge I think we have in America. I think that's the challenge we have in Australia. You need people to actually stand, even if everybody else is sitting. You need people who will speak, even if everybody else is quiet. And that conviction, that leadership is what I think unites a nation and makes people believe in governance again.
Catherine King, this obviously... This is fundamental not only for government but for opposition.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I guess to put it to you and to pick up Brian's point about courage, are we going to see courage from the opposition or just the usual small target carping from the sidelines?
Well, I think that if anything of the our previous time in government, and I suspect the Liberal Party are learning this hard and fast too, I think the issue around not breaking promises is pretty fundamental. I think people are prepared to reform. But what they're not prepared to accept is that you say one thing and then do completely the opposite, and I think that's problematic. But I do think, the question's a very, very important one, and in fact Malcolm and I were talking briefly about this before we came on stage. And I think there is some damage that we have done to each other by our constant carping at each other, not personally, but as parties, which is damaging politics in this country. And I don't know how we step back from that. I think that it probably takes a different leader from your part, I suspect, at some some point, a less pugilistic sort of leader to be able to do that, to actually start to work with each other on common problems. Now, we're seeing that in national security. It's a very important issue that you can have bipartisan work on, but I think we've got a bit of thinking to do as a political body about how we want to be as politicians and how we actually behave. And so
I think that's also why that was such a great moment last week with Julie Bishop and Tanya Plibersek, totally bipartisan. We saw greatness, and
we're nearly out of time, so I've got to hear from Malcolm Turnbull on this key question.
Okay, I think firstly you have to set out a vision, describe where you want to go. Well, you know, what's this all about? What is your goal? You've got to explain that. That's absolutely critical. Then you've got to explain honestly, not dumbing it down, honestly, in the problems that we face. You know, what is the problem with the budget? What is the problem with, you know, dealing with the NBN or whatever? Pick a topic, but explain it and lay it out factually, and then lay out what the options are. And that's where, see, the honest debate we should be having with the Labor Party is about the budget, is one where we say, OK, we all know what the budget problem is. We're spending too much, spending more than we're receiving in revenue. Pretty obvious. OK, that can't go on forever. We've got to do something about it. We say, this is what we'd cut this spending, raise that revenue. And Labor would say, OK, no, we'd cut some other expenditure and raise some different revenue. Then we could have an honest debate. But we're not having that honest debate because, with all due respects to Catherine, who's playing her cards close to her chest at the moment, Labor is not prepared to actually tell us, either concede that there is a problem or tell us what their alternative policies are. And I think that I think there's responsibility on both sides. I think government and opposition should be prepared to put their cards on the table and say, and actually have a debate about the measures. And you never know, out of that debate you might come up with a third solution that is better than either of those that are originally proposed.
Okay, we've got to go, but just quickly a question on that. Are you saying it's time for less partisan, more centrist leadership?
I think it is. I say this: Australian politics, Australian political contests are won or lost at the sensible centre, and look. This is a great nation and we are a good people and we are above all a sensible people. And we recognise that there are strong arguments on either side. But what we as politicians have to do is treat the people with respect. Don't slogan at them. Don't pretend problems don't exist. Lay out the problems. Explain what the problem is as clearly and concisely as you can, the latter being hard for me, as you've gathered, no doubt. And then you can have a debate about the options. And that, I think, that would then be an intelligent debate which respects the public. You see, you know, sometimes politicians think that they're reaching out, you know, to the electorate by dumbing everything down. I think that disrespects the electorate. I think the challenge for us as political communicators is to take complex problems and then explain them in a clear way, not in a simplistic way. We have got to be much better at explaining the problems, because once you've explained the problem, then people will accept the need for a solution, and then you'll have a competition about what the right solution is.